Last month, I made a video where I talked a little bit about an MIT preprint that was published on Archive about AI. And it's a little too early for an update on that, but there is some really interesting news about another MIT preprint published on Archive about AI. And the news around it really highlights why, whenever I discuss a preprint, I try to take pains to point out that it all might be complete bullshit, unless and until it passes peer review and is published in a reputable journal. And, for the record, I do not believe that the mainstream media should really ever be reporting on preprint papers, at least without a whole lot of caveats. Unfortunately, I do not run the Wall Street Journal. So back in December, and I missed this at the time, but they had published a glowing article about supposedly groundbreaking research that had just been posted on Archive from Aidan Toner Rogers, a 26-year-old doctoral student at MIT, one of the top economic schools in the country. The article includes this beautiful photo showing Toner Rogers flanked by two of the most influential living economists of our time, and who also happen to be his advisors, David Altor and Doron Acemoglu, who recently won the Nobel Prize for Economics. "It's fantastic," one of them said about the paper. "I was floored," said the other. Toner Rogers' paper was about using AI to accelerate scientific research. He decided to look specifically at materials science because much of the work of discovering new materials that manufacturers can use in future inventions is trial and error, something that an algorithm could presumably tackle. Here he is describing his research in an hour-long conversation with the Atlantic's podcast.
Yeah, so AI's role is really in this initial idea generation phase. And so how it works is that scientists are going to input to the tool some set of desired properties that they want a material to possess. So in this setting, this is really driven by kind of commercial application because this is a corporate R&D lab. So they want to come up with something that's going to be used in a product. And then they're going to input these desired properties to the AI tool, which is then going to generate a kind of large set of suggested compounds that are predicted by the AI to possess these properties. And so before, scientists would have been coming up with these material designs themselves, and now this part is automated by the tool.
So it's like now I'm having an AI tool give me a bunch of potential donut recipes instead of me coming up with them myself.
Exactly. And I think it's important to note that this whole kind of prediction process is very hard. And so even though I'm going to find pretty large improvements from the AI tool on average, many of its suggestions are just not that good and either aren't going to yield a stable compound or aren't going to actually have the properties that you want it to begin with.
And so, before we get into your results, which are really, really shocking to me, actually, it's kind of cool. The company set up a natural experiment basically for you. Can you walk us through what they did and how they randomized researchers?
Yeah, so I think the lab had just a lot of uncertainty going in about whether this tool was going to be actually helpful. You could have thought maybe it's going to generate a lot of stuff and it's all bad, or it's going to kind of slow people down as they have to sort through all these AI suggestions. So I think they just had a lot of questions about, is this tool going to work and are we going to get actually helpful compounds? So what they did, instead of just rolling it out all at once, was to do 3 waves of adoption where they randomly assigned teams of scientists to waves. And so this allows me as a researcher to look at treated and not yet treated scientists and kind of identify the effects of the tool.
And the results he got were astounding. The researchers using the AI tool discovered 44% more materials, their patent filings rose by 39%, and there was a 17% increase in new product prototypes. Contrary to concerns that using AI for scientific research might lead to a streetlight effect, hitting on the most obvious solutions rather than the best ones, there were more novel compounds than what the scientists discovered before using AI. Wow, incredible. I take back every mean thing I ever said about AI. Just kidding. I know you don't even believe that because I introduced the video by talking about this, but yes, this is in fact complete bullshit. Now, I've talked about past headline-grabbing academic frauds like Dan Ariely, who got a primetime TV show out of it, and Francesca Gino, who got fired. Usually the charlatans in question actually perform an experiment, and then they fudge those numbers a little bit to make sure the results match what will get the best headlines and or book deals or TV deals. The funniest example, of course, is Ariely and Gino working together on a study that claimed to show that people are more honest when they sign an honesty pledge before doing a task where they could cheat to gain a benefit, as they themselves cheated to, at the jokes they just write themselves. But this paper, this is not just another case of a few fudged numbers or some p-hacking. This is a case of a guy who straight made up an entire study and convinced the world that it's real. After Toner Rogers got so much great press, not just from the Wall Street Journal and Atlantic, but also NPR and Freakonomics, and basically any outlet that regurgitates economics research without looking at it too closely, a computer science expert was curious as to where exactly Toner Rogers got all of this beautiful data. Supposedly, this lab employs 1,000 researchers to study potential new materials every day, which narrows it down to a handful of labs, despite Toner Rogers' insistence on keeping them anonymous for some reason. This unnamed firm started their own clinical trial a year before Toner Rogers was even accepted into MIT, and then they agreed to share that very sensitive data with this first-year doctoral student. According to the Wall Street Journal in a follow-up article a few months ago, this computer science expert had experience in materials science and was baffled that he hadn't heard about any lab experiencing so much success using this new tool, to the point where even their patents have substantially increased, something that should have a public record. So the scientists just wanted to know, where did this data come from? That simple question caused MIT to investigate the matter, and they quickly realized Toner Rogers is full of shit. MIT published a press release that didn't name Toner Rogers, but did say that they have no confidence in the provenance, reliability, or validity of the data, and no confidence in the veracity of the research contained in the paper. They state simply, the author is no longer at MIT. That's short and to the point, drama-free, which is why I am so glad that gossipy scientific community still exists online to share the juicy details, because boy, are they juicy. On the same day as MIT's press release, a materials scientist named Ben Schindel posted a newsletter describing some of the red flags that people really should have noticed before, himself included. For instance, as I alluded to earlier, there are no firms that fit the profile of the anonymous lab in the research, though he does list 4 as the closest possibilities: 3M, DuPont, Dow, and Corning. Schindel says he'll be very embarrassed, though, if any real company was behind the data. He thinks the data must have been made up out of whole cloth, and he lists a lot of very good reasons for this. But I simply must skip ahead to his postscript, where he found a social media post pointing to a complaint lodged against the author in question, Toner Rogers, for domain name infringement filed by, drumroll please, Corning Incorporated. This document asserts that on January 15th of 2025, Aidan Toner Rogers registered CorningResearch.com with Squarespace and did so specifically in bad faith with the intent to deceive people into thinking that that was the domain name of the actual material sciences firm. The court found in favor of Corning and turned the domain over to them. Now, here is where we can only make logical deductions from the facts at hand, so this is my opinion. Corning is one of only a few firms that even come close to fitting the anonymous lab in Toner Rogers' paper. January is around the time that MIT was asking him where he got his data. He only had a coming soon parked on the site, so maybe he only needed the domain for something else, like, say, an email address? That's the deduction Schindel made, writing, it's possible he was using the domain name to send fake emails to himself or to generate PDF files at plausible-sounding URLs to show his advisor. All of which brings me to a post written a few days later from Andrew Gelman, a statistics professor at Columbia who hilariously titles his piece, If Only Archive Required Researchers to Sign at the top rather than the bottom of the page, none of this would have happened. Gelman calls out a lot of statistical red flags in Toner Rogers' paper, which again, I'm not going to get into here. If that kind of thing interests you, I love that for you. Please go to the transcript for this video on patreon.com/Rebecca or skepchick.org. Click through, read it all in full. I'll just skip to a choice quote from Gelman. It's kind of amazing for someone to have put so much effort into allegedly faking an entire study and then get sloppy at that last bit. Maybe he should have faked all the raw data so as to ensure internal consistency of his results. I kind of wonder where all these numbers came from. Maybe he used a chatbot to produce them? It would be kind of exhausting to construct them all from scratch. After reading a number of criticisms of this study, I have to say that my conclusion, my personal opinion is, yeah, that's exactly what Toner Rogers did. He wanted to get economics, fame, fortune, and let's be honest about the most likely outcome, a full professorship with tenure at a prestigious school. And he did that by completely fabricating a study about how AI is so great for science. Why wouldn't he get a large language model to just generate the data he needed? Why on earth would he, who obviously thinks AI is just great, not use AI to do the boring work of coming up with fake numbers? Like, of course he would do that. Two more fun quotes from Gelman. First, he goes through what would have been necessary to actually get away with a fake paper, concluding that the only way to produce a truly convincing fake experiment is to do the experiment for real, but that would take a lot of work. Which echoes the point that many scientists have made for years about the idea that Stanley Kubrick faked the moon landing in the 1960s. Back then, we actually had the technology to go to the moon, but it would have been way more difficult to fake it, a fact that is probably going to fade into non-existence these days as AI allows any moron to fake anything if the people viewing it are also morons. But it was true back then. It was easier to send men to the moon than fake it on a soundstage. Finally, Gelman speculates as to what's next for Aidan Toner Rogers, suggesting that he can just get a job at Duke. As a longtime fan of FARC and their Duke sucks tag, this amuses me greatly. I also want to highlight the point that this probably wouldn't have happened if arXiv would just allow comments on the preprints on their website. Because the way things are now, they do not. And so these criticisms, which is like the whole point of preprints going online, so that other researchers can look at them and criticize them and make them better. If we could all just do that on arXiv, then everybody could see the red flags immediately, and maybe, just maybe, this sort of crap wouldn't end up in the hands of the Washington Post. So anyway, what is going to happen to this guy? I don't know. My cynical side says that Gelman is probably right. The world is built for well-connected white boys. My guess is that he'll switch to using his middle name and only one of the hyphenated last names and get a six-figure job working for some tech company's AI division. Good for him. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you loved the video, please subscribe. And if you think the world could use more videos like this and you happen to have a few bucks laying around, head to patreon.com/Rebecca and join an awesome community of nerds like the people whose names you see on the screen right now. Thanks.